Welcome to the Gibson Gazette, where everything in life is story. Story is how we share ideas, politics, vision, fantasies, experiences, even our hopes and dreams. The Gibson Gazette is a podcast show devoted to story. Those we consume, those we tell ourselves, and those told to us. Welcome to the show. How are you doing, AMC? I am your host, co-host, LMG.
LMG and AMC, the acronyms are running the show. Hello, good evening, good night, good morning, folks, whenever you're tuning in. And thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you. And I'm doing well. I'm doing really well. How are you? How's it going?
I'm fine after a lot of false starts and technical difficulties. We're back here. Those who don't know, we had our first show problems. But we think we have it under control now. If we suddenly become
Yes.
people and turn green, you'll know that it's some technical difficulties that we had nothing to do with. Um, but otherwise, I am well and happy to see 2022 alive and prospering. So I can't complain too much. I did enter it initially sick with a cold,
Oh,
but yeah, and I already had COVID back in July. I got
oh.
tested that Monday that I started experiencing symptoms, but
Mhm.
I didn't have any. Well, I got a nasal test, and I've heard since then that I actually should have got a throat test in order to detect
Oh.
Omicron. But in any
Oh.
case, the test did not detect COVID, but I was still sick for like 8 or 9 days. So,
Yeah.
but it wasn't as bad as my COVID experience with the Delta situation. She whipped
I was
my
gonna
ass.
ask. Oh shit.
Yeah, she told me up. She tried to wear me thin, but as you can see, still
Oh
very
wow.
fluffy, still very lush. Um,
You kept the good part, baby. The good part.
right. That's what I'm gonna tell myself in the mirror after a shower. Um, but
So you
welcome to our
unfortunately did.
official first show. Hopefully, you got a chance to check out our narcissistic interviewing one another orientation show that we recorded special just to kind of give us a feel for each other, but also you all a feel for what to expect for this show.
Mhm.
We're going to start with a check in, and I'll ask AMC, what are you checking out these days in the media?
I would say television, more than anything else. Yeah, television. I get quiet time. No, mommy, every 2 seconds. After 10. So 10 o'clock is usually binging hour, and I'm a binger. I love to binge. So lately, I must say I've been watching Sex in the City. I said I wasn't going to watch Sex in the City. I lied to myself. The first episode, you know who it was? It was Demetria Lucas. I'm not even gonna lie. She had put up a spoiler alert and started talking about the first episode, and I was like, "Oh right, it started." And I read the spoiler alert. I said, "What? Okay, now I have to check and see what's going on." So I watched the episode. I mean, by this point, I'm sure everybody knows. Should I even say it?
I mean, you could say some. Yeah, I think at this point, Peloton has helped make sure that everybody knew.
Peloton alone, I think that jackass did. Anyways, so I won't even go there. Um, you know what? Mr. Big died, and it's just been a tumultuous journey for Carrie thus far. It's been pretty interesting to watch it unfold. I thought I was going to be really upset, and I think that a lot of the banter and people not really wanting to be supportive of the show is because Kim Cattrall wasn't going to be there, and Kim was a huge component of that show. Girl, Kim, Samantha was it, right? She was a big component of the show. So I really don't appreciate the way they did her. I think they did her dirty. I don't think that she would have done what they said that she did on the show. Yes, she would have sent those flowers, but she would have never, ever, ever broken up with Carrie like that. That's not how their friendship rolled. So yeah, I was really dirty, mad about the way they did her dirty, and also for what's his name, Mr. Blatch. I was very
Mm.
upset too. Her beautiful gay bestie. I know
Oh
that
well, he
you
died in
passed
real life, so
away.
they had no choice but to
Yeah,
have to write him out the
not
show.
like that.
I
There's so
mean,
many ways.
uh, I don't know. Like I am not. So I'm one of these people who I didn't understand the brouhaha over people not liking the new season. Um, I don't know. I guess they wanted it to stay the same. And like, none of us are the same people we were 20, 30 years ago. So the idea that Sex and the City would have stayed exactly the same show, I mean, even named it a different name, right? And just like that. For
Right.
me, didn't make sense. They did try to correct some of the issues around people of color representation. I have seen
Hmm.
lots of takedowns by people of color cultural critics about those depictions, about those people feeling like they're not given equal time in their own storylines. And I'm like, they're not the show. Like they're if they feel like accessories on some level, it's because they are accessories
They
because the
are.
show is
Yeah.
not centering the people of color friends. The show is centering these three white women in their lives, and you can not
Right.
watch the three white women in their lives, and that's totally acceptable. But the idea that they want the show to be something that it's not, and it has never been. I mean, it's always been a problematic show about white women of
Oh my God.
privilege, and almost fantastical because Carrie could never have afforded that apartment off of a columnist salary in New York City.
Listen.
So it always had been a little fantastical. It always been somewhat problematic. It hasn't aged as well as one would like. But I have tuned in every week to the new version. I don't hate it the way some people have,
I don't hate it either. I
um,
don't hate it.
and I guess I've just taken it for what it is.
Hmm.
Another problematic show about middle class white women with means. So,
And that's
and just
that.
like that, we've described the show with a
That's
few
right.
spoilers. So, check it out for yourself and decide for yourself. We might have just simply outgrown Sex in the City. No one asked for this iteration. So, the fact that I actually am enjoying it well enough to tune in for me says
Right.
something because I wasn't looking forward to it. I hated the second movie.
Oh,
So,
let's not even discuss the movie. It was too whimsical for me. No, no, no.
yeah,
And I mean, like, Carrie Big, the relationship, it was stupid. She should have never. Like, there's so many things. I was cursing at the screen, and it was
right.
bad. It was really, really bad. The whole storyline, the shoes, the everything. It was just stupid. So,
I mean, and
so for it to come,
we've had 5 seasons of Insecure to carry us forward
yeah,
into the glorious future of women's programming,
yeah. I
right?
mean, I
Right? We
mean,
no
it
longer
was
have to rely on Sex and the City to be the people that give us those stories.
at
We have
all, at
Harlem,
all.
Run the World, The Game is
Yes.
back. You know,
That's a show I never really got into. I tried, but I just couldn't. I don't
I
know
mean,
why.
well, that's
But
a whole nother
Harlem,
episode because that's a deeply problematic show that I also watch without fail.
okay,
And I've seen
okay.
all three iterations of it now.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it's, the Akils are interesting writers, storytellers.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
but we'll talk about them another time. I want to tune people into our format. So we do a check in every time you come in with us. We'll start with something positive after check in. Check in may not be positive all the time, folks. We humans, we ain't always having great days. We might have to have a little sippy sip before we get started on the show in order to get through the show. You just never know what's going on in our lives. We just bring it
Right
every
on.
2 weeks to try to be consistent so y'all don't talk about us too bad on social media about how we're not consistent about displaying the podcast show, which you can catch every other Saturday after 3 p.m. Don't be hitting us up Saturday morning talking about where my show.
Don't try it.
um, don't try it. Like you, I am a big binger, though I have posted recently that after 40, we all have a genetic default that kicks in where we want to watch mystery and crime show procedurals like Mima and checking out Matlock and Law and Order and Murder She Wrote. I am watching the updated equivalents of those, often through British mystery shows and crime shows. Um, so that's my bag. I'm always like, I think I would want to live there, and then I'm like, but it's so dreary. And other than the cute beaches, I'm not really sure there's someplace I want to be. Not to mention the rampant racism that also goes on there. But anyway, um, I've been binging on those shows. Um, so our format is loving it. It's complicated. Hated it or not hated it. What do we say? Well, did
Just
we?
no.
No, just no,
Just
just no
no.
is what we landed on. Not hated it. That feels a little bit too gay even for me. That is just no. Um, and then we'll go with the stories that you give us. Obviously, we've only just put out the request for stories, so we won't have any for this episode, but we will be making sure in future episodes that we have them. You can also like, subscribe, share this podcast with your friends. Obviously, the more of those we have, the more longevity this podcast has for potential. And you can catch us every other week, the week that we don't share our podcast, on Twitter Spaces. We'll announce the time and what we're going to be talking about, or we might just wing it because
Hop
it's
in.
not going to be the podcast show. We don't have to be all polished and polite. We can be ratchet and tread ourselves on that. So check us out on Twitter Spaces. You can also find us on all things under at Gibson Gazette. That's GIP as in Paul, SON, Gazette, Gibson Gazette, with the et symbol in front of it. We are a Gen X program, so I hope that you Gen Xers know about the at and the Gibson Gazette and be able to just add that to all your Instagrams, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, whatever you're watching us or listening to us
Find
on.
it.
Find us and tell your friends about us. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Why don't you set us off so people can stop hearing my voice with your loving it for this week?
My loving it. Okay, so guys, I'm going to go a little, with a little feel good story, which everybody's talking about. It was from last year. Actually, it's been from previous years, but last year we heard that this amazing story um, is actually going to be in produced as a movie on Netflix. And I'm talking about the Thanksgiving dinner text messages that went back and forth between Wanda Dench and Jamal Hinton. I think that's so dope. I mean, it goes to show you that there's still some goodness in the world, because sometimes I'm telling you, as we all know, with everything that's been transpiring for the past few years, and not even just the past few years, but just life in general, right? Jesus. So it's always nice to hear a feel good story. And I'll give you the short, synopsis. Uh, I believe it was Wanda who was texting. She was texting somebody else. She thought she was texting a friend, and she ended up changing the last number on the phone number, and it ended up texting Jamal. So she was inviting the person over for Thanksgiving dinner. Jamal said, "Who is this?" And she said, "It's your grandma." And then he said, "No, this ain't my grandma." When he saw when he saw her picture, because he's black and she's white. So he said, "But can I still get a plate though?" And she said, "Sure, come on over." And it's been 5 years now they've been doing this, I think. Yeah, I think it's about 5 years that they've been doing it. Unfortunately, the husband had passed. He passed away last year, but they're still going strong. And now Jamal's girlfriend goes to the Thanksgiving dinners with him, and I think that's beautiful. That's awesome. So I love it. It makes me warm and fuzzy, and I like warm and fuzzy.
So this is where we depart. It's not that it's not warm and fuzzy. The show, I mean, the whole thing was very cute, and I remember
It's
thinking, "Oh, it's that was cute." The first year that they did it, and then when they kept doing it, I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." I don't know that I would have spent my
what?
every Thanksgiving. Well, I mean, to me, thanks. So first of all, outside of my birthday, Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday. So let me just
Oh,
say that, and not
okay.
the colonial version of Thanksgiving. I'm definitely not celebrating
Hmm.
no pilgrims. I'm definitely not celebrating no genocide,
Yeah.
right? Like I'm not celebrating the smallpox blankets. It's not what we're doing here. Um,
Right.
but I do like how black people, how we remix everything. We have remixed and made Thanksgiving our own thing about bringing together
Mm-hmm.
family and friends and nurturing each other with food and lots of hearty laughter and shared stories. And that part of it, I always love, especially the food, because
Mm-hmm.
dressing is one of my favorite foods of all things, of all the foods. And give me some good dressing, some good greens. Yes, God. Anyway, mac and cheese. All right, I'm digressing. I'm having a
Listen,
fat boy moment. Um, yeah,
I'm gonna need
so
you to break
I
down the dressing and stuffing thing though one time in the future.
no,
Okay,
no, no,
thank
not
you.
stuffing. No, no, not stuffing. We're not white.
I know.
Dressing,
See, I knew that was
cornbread
gonna happen.
dressing. Yeah, cornbread dressing. Anyway,
Okay.
but so Thanksgiving is to me a time to be spent with your loved ones and the people who you are kind of closest to. And
Mm-hmm.
so I find it interesting. I mean, I definitely get new friendships and new traditions, but I just couldn't imagine spending my every Thanksgiving with this new friends family over
Mm-hmm.
my own. That's yeah, I don't get that. I mean, though I don't know enough about his personal story. Maybe he's not close to his family. Maybe he need maybe it's a chosen family situation. There's lots of different
Right.
things that could
Right.
contribute to that. That
Yeah.
and let's be real, the holidays is not the same for everybody. For some of us, the holidays are a time of incredible trauma and pain, right? And so,
Exactly.
who knows what his story is, that where he finds home, where he finds comfort, where he finds joy is in this former stranger's home for Thanksgiving.
Well, they become
Yeah.
living strangers now, right? So
Yeah,
if
they're
it
definitely not
works for them,
strangers at this point. Yeah.
right, right, for
Every
sure. So I
Thanksgiving.
think
Every Thanksgiving. I don't know. That's a lot.
everything given.
That's
That's
a
their
lot.
thing. That's their thing.
And I still don't know how you make a whole movie out of that unless we're going to go into depth about why these people needed each other, right? Like, is there a connection story about
Yeah,
what they found missing in their own lives through this relationship or through this friendship? Now, that I'm here for. That would be
it
interesting
has
to
to
see.
go. It has to go
Though,
deeper than just skimming the top. It's not.
uh,
Who's gonna put that?
I don't know. It
Otherwise, this
depends
is
on
the
where's this
story.
playing? Is this a Hallmark channel? Because if it's a Hallmark channel, we can hang it up. It ain't gonna get no in depth. It's gonna be some
Oh,
problematic racial thing.
oh my goodness!
Some white savior thing. I don't know. It's not gonna be
No,
right. It's
no,
not gonna be right.
no, please,
No, if we're
no,
talking about Hallmark Channel, it's not gonna be right.
no, no, and no.
All
No.
right. So that's your loving it for this week.
That's my
My
loving it
loving.
for this week.
All right. So my loving it for this week
Mhm.
is a I'm going to talk about one of the things that I love. So right now, I'm loving Abbott Elementary. It's an American mockumentary sitcom television series created by Quinta Brunson for ABC. It stars Brunson as a second grade teacher at Abbott Elementary. Uh, Tyler James Williams from Everybody Loves Chris is who
Yeah.
played Chris in that show is in it. Janelle James, who plays this principal, who steals every scene she's in. She's absolutely hilarious. The great dream girl herself, Cheryl Lee Ralph, is in it in a very believable, we all know this character, Christian woman who loves her husband, right?
Oh boy.
And Lisa Ann Walter and Chris Perfetti, that's how we say his name, Perfetti. Um,
Mm.
so it just launched about. And by the time you hear this podcast, about 3 episodes will have aired. I found all three incredibly hilarious, and it's talking about really passionate, dedicated teachers um, led by a principal who's not as passionate or dedicated, who are brought together in a Philadelphia public school trying to help their students succeed against every structural obstacle that you can imagine. Um, and they managed to find the humor in that, and I thought that was amazing. Now that's the thing I love, and as part of a renaissance that we're seeing, right, and having great black
Mm,
comedies come back, great black
yeah.
story coming back as a whole in the media. You know, we have cycles. We had a cycle in the '70s. We had a cycle in the '90s. We're having another cycle right now, um,
Mhm.
which begs a question: should we still be hung up about stereotypes if there are so many more images and representations of blackness to balance out those kind of flat characters and stereotypes that historically we found issue with? You know, particularly when we know those stereotypical people can be found in real life, right? Like we actually know, like when I watched Janelle James do this principal character, I'm like, I know that woman, right?
Mhm.
Like, and she's hilarious. But you know, I could see some woke, not woke, because then I'm gonna sound like a Republican on Fox News. You know, I could see some people having taking issue, some critics taking issue with this idea of this black woman principal who is so completely inept, so completely out of her depth, and does not
Mm.
care that she's inept or out of her depth, and is not even aware that she's inept and out of her depth, right? Like, who is a is hilarious. She's the comic relief. But you know, I could hear people saying, you know, making comments about this kind of character
Mhm.
being very flat and stereotypical, and what are we saying about black women in leadership? You know, I could hear some of those people
Oh,
having
okay.
those issues with
Okay.
it, right? But
Right.
you know, so you know, I've talked. What are your thoughts about this? You know, to me, I will say that there's a difference in depictions rooted in anti-blackness and whose purpose it is
Mhm.
to reinforce an oppressor's story or narrative about our inhumanity. You know, Marlon Riggs documentaries like Ethnic Notions and Color Adjustment, as well as the scholarship of people like Donald Bogle on the subject in film and television, do great jobs of naming and identifying potentially harmful archetypes, right? However, just as often it seems to me that what gets dismissed as stereotypes of buffoonery are character types that we all know from in our community and are embarrassed by. You know, we're not
Yeah.
embarrassed when it's amongst each other, but we are embarrassed when outsiders of our community see those people or see those people presented on a mainstream stage. So what's your thoughts on
Well,
that?
as soon as you said that, well, number one, I haven't watched Abbott Elementary as yet, and I do intend to. Just the trailers that I've seen have been absolutely hilarious. I said, okay, I got to give this one a shot. As you were talking about the stereotypes of, the first person that came to mind was Medea and Tyler Perry. I mean, that's exactly what came to mind. And then right away, I remember when this whole conversation started, when Tyler Perry started doing Medea, and then we started having to talk about Flip Wilson when he was playing his character, and I can't remember her name, but what he was playing, because I remember these shows, my parents watching these shows, and I just sit down on my
Are you talking about
daddy's
like
legs and
Flip
I'm watching
Wilson and Geraldine?
Geraldine. Yes.
Yes, Geraldine. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes, exactly. So, all of the conversations that stem from that, and you're absolutely correct in the sense that we're not comfortable, especially not even just us, but when people outside of our community are peering in, because it's something we know and we understand, so it's personal to us. But when it's people outside and it's for everyone to consume, we're like, no, 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 no. Like that's where we want to step back and kind of guard that part um, of what we know and who we know, because everybody knows somebody like a Tyler Perry Medea. I mean, I think we have a lot of issues with just Tyler on the whole, and his writing and different things. We Some of us undercover love some of his movies. They just don't want to say it. There are a couple of them that might be actually a little bit okay. I won't say decent, okay, but I mean, it's a whole other conversation. But still,
I'm gonna say we could spend a
that's
whole episode devoted to just Tyler
that's
Perry.
right.
And
I
those
could
who
talk
follow me
about
on
this.
social media already know my thoughts on this.
That's a full out conversation. situation.
Yes.
But that was the first thing that came to me. And yeah, we don't like other people in our business. This is just how we flow. So in
But I
terms of
guess
mhm.
no, go ahead. I'm sorry. You
No,
were
that's
saying?
okay. It's gone. It's
Oh.
okay.
See, now the people gonna write me because I didn't cut you off and you done lost your thought. See, it's terrible. Um, no, look, I guess the question I have is the issue before, and it was a valid issue, was that these
Mhm.
archetypes were the only, right? They were the only depictions of us. And different eras had
Yeah.
different archetypes that were the onlys. And now we're
Mhm.
in an age where that's less true. I mean, that's not to say that we're in a promised land and that, we have all the representations and a range of stories and characters that we need to
Mhm.
have to show the fullness of Black people. That is, a promised land to come. But we, at this moment, have Black horror, Black thrillers, Black comedy, Black
Mhm.
romance, Black holiday movies. I'd have never thought in a million years Black holiday movies would become
Whoa.
this thing,
Yeah.
but there's like 20 of them a year now.
Mhm.
And so do we need to be as hyper vigilant about the policing of characters that are flat? And other creative writers will know what I mean by flat characters. Those characters that are really just one thing, right? They're kind of one note
Yeah.
characters,
One-dimensional. Mhm.
versus round characters. Every character can be round in a story. It pulls
Mhm.
focus, and sometimes, like in the case of this principal, she brings a certain amount of levity and absurdity and she actually brings the satire, right? Like, so these teachers are trying really hard and it's not like she's an obstacle, but she's not a help really either. Though there is an episode where she ends up being a help through her ridiculousness, right? Like through her absurdity,
Mhm. Mhm.
which is less intentional on her part, right? But ends up being comical. So, I guess, now that we have much more room for there to be a more of a range of expression of who we are as a people, do we need to be
Yeah.
quite as concerned or as hyper vigilant about the stereotype? I'm curious about what you want to know, and I actually want the people to comment. Feel free to comment in the comment section on whatever platform you're listening to us on. We love your thoughts. But so, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't think we do. I think that it may sound a little, I don't know. But I don't think we do. I think that you had mentioned that there's so much to write about, but I think there still needs to be balance. Like there's always going to be space for that, and it's a little bit of the chance to be comfortable, I guess. That's there as the buffer. It'll be there. I think it's something that we know, and it'll continue as we go along. But at the same time, there's like a treasure trove of things to write about. We're very multifaceted. It started to come out in different ways. I don't think that we need to be as vigilant as before, and especially as like people like Issa Rae and a lot of up and coming creatives are kicking down the door and they're doing it their way. Because we're looking at if you look at Issa from Awkward Black Girl, I would like sit at my computer to watch
We all
Awkward
did.
Black Girl. We all did, right? And then when
Yeah.
we heard, oh, she's going to HBO, we're like, oh my God, she's getting a platform where she'll be able to actually just open up the Pandora's box and go with it and run with it. And that's exactly what she did. But you can easily say that you saw yourself in Issa. And that's like the good times, the bad times, the stupid times where you're like, oh my God, she did that. Oh my God, she cheated on Lawrence. Oh my God. Like those are all the things that we go through and we know and understand. So we see it, it's our reflection. So I don't think we really have that to worry about um, unless we just continue with just that line of thinking. If it's just going to be narrow moving forward, then we have an issue, and I think that's like a discussion that um, showrunners and writers would have to have with themselves, you know. and take a look around themselves to see what's going on, right? But all in
I
all, I
also
think
think
those
it
are some
depends on
really
who
great
gets to tell
movies.
the story, right? Like if it's a white person that's telling the story
That's
and
different,
they're making that depiction about a black stereotype, then I'm certainly going to give my backup a
for
lot
sure.
more because
Yeah,
to me then that's fitting into the agenda of anti-blackness as a depiction
yeah.
intentionally or unintentionally meant to harm or be biased about who we are. But when
Hmm.
we are sharing, you know, and some of this is the critique of Tyler Perry, right? Like when we're sharing flat characters, I think the issue with Tyler Perry for me is that do those characters ever get to be round? Right? Are they always almost all flat? Are they almost always one or two things in very cartoonish ways? But
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, but if we have one character that is a comic relief character to bring a certain amount of levity or to bring a point, and it's contextual to the story and it makes sense for the story, it's not an
Right.
outlier, and it's rooted in something real. I mean, I think one of the reasons I've not yet heard the critique about Janelle that I brought to bear is because
Hmm.
we so know her. We so know this principle, especially if you're an educator, you know this woman. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, so that's it. But I'm loving Abbott Elementary, and I'm loving the things that it's helping us to think about. Um, you know, because it's quietly encouraging people to be invested in their public schools, and I think that that's always a message that's worth
That's
encouraging.
fantastic. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
All right,
fantastic.
so that was
Well, we
our
are
loving
coming to.
this segment. And we're going to switch it over now to It's Complicated. So, what are you
You go
finding
first.
complicated? No, I just got through talking a lot. I like to hear your voice. So,
Oh.
I know, right? So, what's your It's Complicated for us this week?
It's complicated. Okay, so this one I pulled out of a personal slash speaking to other people about their stories kind of vibe. Um, and I'm sure you've seen this ad nauseum. Be kind. You never know what someone is going through. A lot of people, we've been saying that a lot, especially over the pandemic. It's something you always hear in general anyway, but I've read a lot of articles that are centered like on around this quote, and especially with the few years and everything that's with everything that has, my God, what's wrong with my tongue today? With everything that has been transpiring over time, people always, I find that people come forth with the niceties, but then there's this huge, like, black hole of a statement where people come up with, where they're like, oh, that's great. Everyone's going through it too. Or like, yeah, I understand your plight. Da, 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 da. Everyone is. Okay, listen. Granted, if I'm speaking to you and I'm pouring my heart out to you, of course I know everybody is going through something. But I'm speaking to you, or other people are speaking to you directly with their problems. They want to speak to you as a soundboard and as an individual, right? So stop generalizing. Let the person speak their piece and understand where the person is coming from. So don't tell me, yeah, I understand that you've got it rough. Other people are going through it too. That's not comforting. It's a little rude, really. And there have been quite a lot of people where they're like, oh, I was speaking about, what was going on, da, 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 and then somebody was like, oh, yeah, yeah, I heard my friend was going through, a friend of mine is going through that too. Yeah, just take it easy. And there are other people going through things, and we know this, we understand this. Just listen to the person at the moment. It's like we need to stop for a second and really learn to listen and hear and see each other. That's the problem for me. It's a little complicated. I love the niceties, thank you, but don't start with that and then pull out the rug from underneath me. Like,
I'm totally hearing
why?
the mother in you while you're talking about this story, though. I can see your son looking up at mommy while you're explaining in this very patient but not patient tone about this issue. I just want the world to see this moment of mommyhood that we're hearing collectively on here. Go ahead, as you were.
No, I just feel like, as usual, like we tend to, we hear but we don't listen. That's what it comes down to sometimes, I think. And I'm not being like, I don't want to be, no, I don't want to sound selfish or that I'm, being a naysayer to like other people's plights or anything like that. That's not the case. I'm just saying that sometimes people just want to talk to you in a, individually want you to listen to their stories, and that's it. That's it. That's all. We totally get there are a lot of things going on. My goodness, there's so many things going on. But just, just listen. That's all. That's all. Just be a soundboard. That's
So
it.
I have a different take. I think this is gonna be the
Go
show,
ahead.
right? I have a different take. I mean, I think that the I think what people are trying to do is connect, right? And display empathy. Now, whether or not that's always authentic or performative, that's a conversation for another day. And I think
Absolutely.
that
Yeah.
you kind of innately know when people are performing empathy versus when they're sincere about it.
Oh, sure.
But that said, like if somebody shared something horrible, I think it's human nature to want to be like, oh my God, I've had that experience too, or I know somebody who's had that experience too, as a reflexive form of empathy, or connection. It doesn't always land. I also think that
Mm,
we have been conditioned, at least in the West. I don't know about other cultures, but I know in the West, I think we've been conditioned to feel like we're supposed to provide a solution to the problem that's been shared, or provide some kind of answer to it. And as you just pointed out, sometimes people don't want a solution; they just want to be heard, and for somebody to be
yeah.
present for their bear witness to their moment,
Hmm.
and that's really it. But so one of the things I've learned to do as a friend, because I'm a Capricorn and I'm a man and I am solutions oriented, and these are problems in the communication issues that you describe, right? So I will ask, if somebody's about to go into a tirade of complaint, and I know this is a person who likes to complain. I have friends like that. I'll
Hmm.
ask them, do you want me to just listen to you and be present for you, or are you looking for me to give you feedback?
Mm.
And that's something that's been modeled for me really beautifully by my mentors, such as Dr. Tim Harrison. When I was very young when working with him, and he never gave me unsolicited advice. I always had to ask him for it, which is so different from my peers. My peers always gave
Hmm.
me unsolicited advice, and I always had to like pull it from him, as he was like the smartest person I knew at the time, right? So I've borrowed that from him. Like, is this a moment where you just need me? And then I had a friend tell me once, the friend that likes one of my friends that likes to complain. I'm not going to name him because he'll know who he is in this. Uh, you know, bitch, I just want to complain right now. Like, just listen to me complain, right? I don't need you to fix it. I just want to complain. And I was like,
Right.
oh, okay. And then it clicked. I got it. I was like, oh, this person is not, he just needs to get it out. And that's his process. And once he's gotten it out,
Yeah.
he's fine. And, so
Exactly.
you learn that about your friends as you go. But yeah, I think that, if there are tools that people need, ask someone, do you looking for feedback or are you just looking for presence? I think that that's and people will be candid with you. They might be shocked that you even asked them that, right? And that you were considerate enough to ask them that. So that's
Yeah.
the way I look at it. I don't always look at it as people are
But I
doing the
like,
most.
that aspect. I don't. It's not a thing. It's not about like doing the most. I think that you said it too as well. It's how it lands, and it's
Hmm.
how it's the communication barrier sometimes, and the fact that sometimes that could actually make somebody uncomfortable and they don't know how to respond. I went through that so much, especially when my dad passed away. So
Oh,
it's a difficult time and people want to comfort you, but sometimes it doesn't come out right. So it's, it's either you really want to try to add some levity to the moment, and you just don't want to complicate things, and then you get diarrhea of the mouth, and it comes out, and it doesn't land properly. I almost cuss out somebody on my dad's funeral day because of that. So it just doesn't land right. You said it right there. That's what it is sometimes. It's not about doing too much. I just think that it's the landing and the communication and the hearing and listening. That's it.
No, but I think there's so I mean to me there's kind of like the day to day experience of wanting to vent, right? Like which is where I thought you were coming from at first, and I think that that's
I know.
different than moments of grief. So the day after this podcast airs will be the ninth anniversary of my mother's death. I've talked very candidly about my mother's transition as it was a suicide, and in my process when that happened was I had a conversation. I literally had a conversation with myself the day
Mm.
I heard it about what happened, and it was I'm gonna try my best not to curse nobody out. I'm going to assume that people are trying to come from a good place, but people don't know what to say out their mouth during grief.
Yes.
We don't have good
Yeah.
tools. We don't have good language. Um, I know I'm going to be sick of all of the, I'm so sorry for your loss condolences. I actually
Yeah.
actively avoid trying to say that when responding to people's death because I heard it so much. I heard it about
Hmm.
500 times on Facebook by itself. And every one of those people were well wishing and trying to be of comfort. And I
Of course.
appreciated the fact that they even took the time. But, by your 500th one of those, that's not even counting the verbal ones you get on the phone and the text messages and
Oh
the
my
people who know you
God.
personally.
You're inundated.
That can get into, somebody like me who's lived in lots of places and know lots of people from lots of fields. It can become very overwhelming. And so,
It is very
I just had to
overwhelming.
be like, I'm going to give everybody grace. I don't want to come out of this with new enemies. I don't want to come out of this with new problems. That was one thing that I was like, I don't want to pick up an alcohol problem or a drug problem in order to avoid the grief. I'm going to walk through the grief. I'm going to go through the process. And, but
Hmm.
yeah, going back to the language conversation, like people don't have the tools. They don't know what to say.
That's it.
And you find yourself, and everybody who's lost a parent or lost somebody really significant to them know this, you find yourself giving more energy trying to comfort the person than you
Hmm.
do than them comforting you. Right? And so that
But
also
I
was a
wonder,
work.
it was it to be a buffer though? Do you know what I mean? Was it to be a buffer in between what you would end up receiving because it was so overwhelming?
I don't know. Like
Oh no.
it just I'm somebody who's keenly sensitive to energy vampires, and not everybody who was doing that was energy vampire, but I'm aware of when I'm giving more energy out in a moment
Hmm.
where I should be receiving the energy, right? The energy
Hmm.
should be nurturing a salve, a bomb, and that wasn't what was happening. I was nurturing them.
Yeah.
And some of it again is they don't know what to say. They're awkward. They might have also loved or cared about my mother or knew of her, and they're having their own grief moment. um,
Yeah.
but you're like in the back of your head, you're like, but I'm the son. That was my mama. It ain't no matter what you're going through, it ain't the same. Right, right. But of
Yeah.
course, to say that
That's
would be to be
correct.
an asshole. But that's what you're
I
thinking in
know.
the back of your
I
head at the
get it.
time. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think that this is a perfect example of it's complicated, right? Like I just try
Yeah.
to give
Yeah.
grace as much as possible. I only lost it once, and I'm not going to go into depth about this, but there were people who couldn't make the first memorial, which was like kind of done very quickly, and decided to have a second memorial for my mother back in Chicago, where we're from, where she hadn't lived for like 20 years, and wanted me and my brothers and sisters to go through that again.
Oh no.
And
No.
yeah, and I was like, y'all lost your
No.
mind. Like
Yeah.
that was the one time I lost it. I kirked on
I
people.
don't blame you.
Like we barely made it through the first one. We definitely not doing no
Right.
second one. So there is a whole memorial that was videotaped where me and none of my siblings are there. My mother's children are there for it because we just were
Oh
like,
my
y'all crazy.
gosh.
We can't go through that twice. Once was difficult enough, not twice.
What is
So
enough? I'm sorry. Like, no. My
yeah,
my father's anniversary is coming up as well at the end of the month, so I yeah. Mm.
yeah.
Yes.
Whew. So my it's complicated. Hopefully, will lighten the mood because we done brought it down, child. We done brought it all into the grief
Oh
space.
wait.
But I think that people, a lot of people lost people in 2021 and 2020, and they can also appreciate this conversation. So we're not always going to
Very
be
true.
light and funny on this show. My
Yeah.
It's Complicated is we have Kings of Napa on OWN, which is about a
Oh,
wealthy
nice.
black vineyard owning family. Our
Which was
Kind of People, which is about rich, upper middle class black people who are legacies of black wealth. And black soap operas coming left and right that depict black wealth, black luxury, hyper consumerism, and capitalistic investment at a time when those things are being deeply interrogated and deconstructed for their potential
mm,
value to combat or shield one from racism, oppression, othering, and criticism from the status quo. So these shows are great. These, well, not all of them are great because the quality varies. The quality varies a lot on these kind of luxury black soaps. But they kind of dovetail with what's happening on Instagram, where you seeing the hashtag movement around black luxury and black people in exotic locales and opening gifts and presents and that are Chanel bags and Birkin bags and Gucci belts and deeply aspirational couture.
yeah.
And so it begs the question: what are the messages we're sending through these aspirational shows and Black luxury hashtag movement about the haves and have-nots when most Black people, regardless of educational attainment, are a paycheck or two away from disaster? Right? Like when most Black
Mm,
people, who does this luxury narrative in the mainstream serve at a time when black people are finally getting audiences articulating a range of all too real financial oppressions, finally getting audiences about reparations, pointing out racial privilege differences and disparities, saying the issues of the haves and have-nots are systemic and institutional and structural, but then you turn on your TV and we bossing and we balling and we in $5,000 worth of clothes and shoes and
yeah.
and some of this conversation, we're going to always name check folks who we are borrowing from. Some of this conversation is inspired by Black feminists like Kim Foster, and we name check Demetria Lucas, who's an amazing podcaster and friend in my head. And we've talked before, and I've guested on her show before. Demetria's amazing. But
Love
Kim has
her.
brought some of this up in a recent podcast or YouTube of her own, right? Like, and like me, she doesn't begrudge black folks liking, loving, even consuming nice things. I
Mm,
resemble that remark. But there is something about magnifying black wealth stories that is so dissonant with most black people's reality, even though they are and have always been elite, wealthy black families. You know, just to bring it back home, the median income for black workers right now with a bachelor's degree, we're not talking about the
mm,
poor, with a bachelor's
mm.
degree is $50,000 compared to 61,176 for white workers, 62,292 for Asian workers. For those of us with
Mm.
advanced degrees, the black median income only grows to 81,559, while white and Asian professionals earn 115,240 or 120,889 respectively with that advanced degree. That's how far apart that disparity. You ain't. I know how much a Gucci belt costs because I used to live that life. I used to live that fake it till you make it life in my 20s, right? Like I had, secondhand, borrowed from, gifted by wealthier friends and mentors.
That's
couture
big, yeah.
shirts
Yeah.
and belts that were like $500 and shoes that were like $500, and that was in the '90s. Like I imagine those things today are probably $1,000 or more, you
Yeah.
know. And so, what does it mean that we're like who is this story serving?
Do
Is
you
this
think
serving us? Go ahead.
do you think that maybe it's a form of escapism? Do you think that I mean, because we all love to watch the lavish shows in the house. I mean, look at Housewives of Atlanta. It may not be lavish to some of us, but some other people, I mean, living on those houses are huge, and the space and yada yada yada, the life and the parties and everything is extra. It's beyond extra, and we live for it. We love to see it. um Maybe that sense of it doesn't really come down to, oh, I need to buy this bag. It comes down to, I just want to escape and watch the shit. I just want, you know what I mean. It's nice to see people that look like me dressing up in all of that Gucci business and whatever that I can't afford, but they look hella good. I'm gonna watch this show. So maybe it's not. Yeah, I totally get the hyper consumerism, and yes, definitely. Oh my gosh, they're like plugging all the Gucci and Prada and Fendi down your throat every 2 seconds. Um, but
I
yeah,
mean, it's not like
maybe
they
it's
hyping
just
black designers on these shows either. Usually it
sure.
is the mainstream white aspirational designers whose
Yes,
labels
sir.
are intentionally out of your reach, intentionally out of your
Right,
price range as a
right.
normative purchase.
You're absolutely correct. Well, there you own. Hello, hi. And Kings of Napa was actually recorded here in Ontario, since I heard.
Ah,
At a lot of We have a lot of wineries down here, so I was told that it was recorded here, and I'm like, well, own King of Napa. There are a host of amazing black designers out there that you can pick and choose from. I'm not saying you can't wear a Hermes shirt with another black designer's, belt and shoes and purse. There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody puts an outfit together, but at least show up a little bit for your peoples, man. Call up Issa. She can give y'all some notes.
yeah, Issa did a really good job of showing
Amazing.
and demonstrating a litany of black designers. I actually don't know enough about
Yep.
the stylists at Kings of Napa to be able to make that critique to say that they're not. But I think that there's just kind of an overall trend. Like even on reality shows like Selling Tampa, there's a new
I just
real
watched
estate
that.
show that's on OWN too that just launched last week or so. And they're
Okay.
all kind of bossing and flossing, right? And those people are actually making that kind of money, right? They're not. It's not like a
Yeah.
scripted show where it's all kind of fantasy. These folks in these reality shows are actually earning significant money. Now, not initially, we know from Mona Scott Young, like the Mona Scott Young productions, we know that those people were not making that much money on those shows starting out. Like even on the Real
Mm.
Housewives of Atlanta, it took a while for them
All of
to
them.
start making a significant amount. I mean, some of them are making like $1 million, 1.2 and $1.4 million checks, $800,000 checks a year.
Right.
But not every reality show is starting with that. Most of them starting like $3,500 an episode, $5,000 an episode,
The
right?
entire franchise. Every one of them.
Right. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, but there is an interest. It's the timing is interesting. I'm not saying we shouldn't see. I mean, one of the things about our kind of people is that it was originally supposedly based on a book, even though it has no relationship at all to the book on this in this depiction. But Lawrence Otis Graham wrote a book about the black elite and the black wealthy people who have been depicted in Dorothy West novels back in the Harlem Renaissance era. Generations of black wealth. Shamari Willis has a great book about the first six black millionaires called Black Fortunes. I mean, and so there is a legacy of black people of means even through the worst of our times. But I do think that there's
Right.
something interesting about this particular time when we're talking very publicly Black Lives Matter and other advocacy groups talking very publicly about racial disparities and income disparities and how much of that is informed by structural and institutional racism. And then on the
Mhm.
other side of this, we're depicting all of this black luxury and the black wealth, and and if I'm a white person who's not necessarily tuned into the readings and I'm only seeing the visuals, those two things are
Yeah.
mathing. You know, and
Right.
black people have always liked to look good, so that let's also put that out there, right? Like, but it wasn't a
Of course.
label look good. It was our style and how we put things together. And we could go, I mean, Philly is internationally known as folks going to a thrift store and coming out looking like they spent $5,000 on an outfit based on some
Right.
thrift store garb, just based on how they, they work their swag with it.
Put together.
So,
Yeah.
us wanting and needing and desiring to look good is not new. But yeah, there's definitely an interrogation to be made and had about the timing of this particular depiction of blackness when we wasn't allowed
Mhm.
to have these kind of depictions before, and right when we're politically and socially trying to have an audience for some very real economic disparities. So that's my it's complicated. You got any other thoughts on that before we close out? It's complicated.
No, let's keep it moving. Let's keep it moving.
All right. So here we go. So we purposely set up the show in a way that if only you want the good and the sweet, you start our early part of it. You might want to not listen to the just know, because the just know is us talking about the shit we hate and probably using foul language and not being very Christian. So uh, my just know, I'll start our just know and see what you think about it.
Okay.
Steve Harvey recently came out against cancel culture, saying that he was afraid to make comedy and that other comedians that he's in relationships with are afraid to make comedy because of cancel culture. Um, and I just want to call bullshit. I want to, like, this is a Fox News depiction, and y'all probably gonna hear me say this a lot because we sometimes adopt some of the language of the right and the language of oppressors in our arguments about things. This cancel
Mhm.
culture, first of all, what they're calling cancel culture is marginalized people, primarily femmes or queer people, finally having an
Mhm.
audience to push back on oppressive language about the bodies that we're born into, and the identities that we are embracing, right? And sometimes it's about not wanting to be harmed, right? Physically harmed, sexually harmed, emotionally harmed, mentally harmed. And that pushback against harm is being diminished, reduced, dismissed as cancel culture, right? Like, and some of these people have not just done kind of verbal harm that could have repercussions in how those things get co-signed and affirmed within the culture by community, by other people who are looking for affirmations so that they too can perpetuate harm, but also by there are actually real physical sexual harm that has been done by some of these comedians that have been called out through the YouTube, Me Too movement. Louis C.K. was called out for allegedly masturbating in front of women. You know, that
Mhm.
he said he was going to mentor, was or offering opportunities to, and he then pulling out his dick in front of them, right? And Louis C.K. lost some things initially, but he is right now in 2021. He went on tour, like he had a
Yeah.
comeback tour, and people bought tickets,
Yeah.
and those tickets weren't cheap. He is not canceled,
Mm.
and he actually committed harm. Like he actually committed a sexual harm, an offensive harm. So and then we talk about like folks like a Kevin Hart. Kevin Hart is experiencing one of his biggest years. He's in movie after movie on Netflix. He hasn't
Yeah.
lost anything. He didn't get a chance to host the Oscars.
Oh,
Boohoo.
right. Mhm.
Like he's still a multimillionaire. He still has respect in an industry. He still is afforded opportunities. Um, and then, of course, there's Dave Chappelle, which I have gone off in ad nauseum about both on other podcasts and I own almost every Dave Chappelle thing there is to own outside of the Netflix specials. So I came to Dave Chappelle as a fan, but
Mhm.
as a member of the LGBTQ plus community, I am deeply offended, both as a gay man and for my trans sisters, the language and the comments that were made on the closer. And I recognize that I am not the arbiter of all things LGBTQ plus. That there are plenty of LGBTQ plus people who did not have an issue with what Dave Chappelle said, but plenty did. And but Dave Chappelle has not been canceled. He still cleared $60 million checks. He still is getting
Mhm.
opportunities. He's still getting articles written about him. He's not missed one step. And he jokingly said that if this was cancel culture, he should have been canceled a long time ago because he's economically benefited
Right.
so much from the cancellation. So, Steve Harvey is full of shit. These black comics who are complaining about cancel culture are full of shit. Cat Williams, who said, we should have what do you call it, roadblocks. We should have some bumpers. We should have some stops um, about the harm that we're doing as comedians. We should be going deeper and punching up more. We should be thinking about what we're saying. Um, and he hasn't stopped being funny. His last special was hilarious. He hasn't stopped getting arena tours. So the question is, are you just not talented enough to meet the new objectives, the new culture, the new standards of comedy today? And if you're not, just say
Right.
that. Don't blame it on cancel culture. Blame it on your lack of talent. Just say no.
You see, do you see Steve Harvey blaming himself or coming out to say, I am just not that talented in order to get what I want to get? Yeah, that's not,
I mean, he's graduated to
has to
like
be a spirituality.
family TV shows. Nobody, he's a game show host and a judge now on some. I still can't believe
Nobody
anybody
checks
bringing their
for him,
cases
really.
to Steve Harvey. Like
Yeah.
I would eat my arm before I would take a case to Steve Harvey. But yeah,
Listen,
that's what people are. Nobody checking for a new Steve Harvey comedy. Nobody was like clamoring like, "Oh my God, I really miss Steve Harvey as a comedian."
thank you very much. Because really and truly, after Kings of Comedy, yeah, no, I'm good. That's it. Stops there. I don't think that he's really put out anything, of of contest or anything like that for us to be like, oh my god, like he's coming out with a judge show. I can't wait to see it. I have to DVR it. It's not going to happen. And when I read about the judge show, I said, when did he become a judge? He's been too busy social media in all of his outfits. When did that happen? Like we don't want to see that.
I mean, well, it
I
kind of
don't know.
happened because Kelly Clarkson took his slot for his daytime talk show. I mean,
And
Kelly,
she's doing quite well with
right,
it.
and she did
So
excellent with his time slot. I still like. I would love to know
yeah,
the inside Hollywood story about how that went down, because like Steve Harvey or not, he has a following, and people were checking out his show. It was a highly rated show, and they still gave it to
yeah, it
Kelly
was.
Clarkson.
But wasn't he doing? Wasn't didn't There was a lot of talk of him doing some really like bad shit behind the scenes and stuff. Like his crew wasn't too happy. Like there were some letters and all kind. There was a whole bunch of drama. I don't.
I
That's what I remember anyway.
I mean,
So
all of that
I don't
might be
even.
true. I don't put anything past Steve Harvey. I mean, he has a very inspirational story of his rags to riches,
He
and
does.
and
Yeah.
God bless that he was able to pull that together for himself and his family. But
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, Steve Harvey has always been problematic as a comic. I never
Yeah.
watched the Steve Harvey show back in the '90s. So even though I had my girl in it, I
Um,
still was like not checking for it. All right. So, what are your thoughts on Just Know, and what is your Just Know, AMC?
People might scream at me for this one, but I mean it's so damn obvious. Let's talk a little bit about Chris Cuomo. Can we please? Can we? Um,
Oh, okay. Now that
my
almost feels like a throwback story at this point, but go ahead.
Yeah, it does. It does. But it has a little twist because my question really. So okay, let's go back. Obviously he was fired from his highly rated CNN
Well,
gig and
before you do
his
that, you might want to let the people know who Chris Como is, because I know everybody should know who these people are, but they may not know. So,
Chris Cuomo is or excuse me, past tense, was he was a very popular what's the word I'm looking for?
news
News, not
anchor.
anchor, I guess. Yeah, news
Hmm.
anchor on CNN. He had a very highly rated show. People tuned into him, loved the banter that him and Don Lemon used to have. I must say, it was very like friendly and chill and cool, and it was nice to watch. It was nice to watch. It was very amorous and what's it called, bro romance going on thing going on. It was really really nice to see. Fine. But he went and kind of supported his sexual predator of a brother and a governor. Please
Yes,
correct me if
Governor
I'm wrong.
Mario Cuomo
Yes, he
of New
ended up
York.
supporting his brother. Yes, of New York, ended up supporting his brother with all of the nastiness that he has been doing behind the scenes with
Let's just
making
say
an
that those are
assumption.
allegations.
Okay, there are allegations.
You ain't trying
Okay,
to, we ain't
okay.
trying to be sued.
Let me go back a bit.
Allegedly, there are some stories of some Me Too moments with this brother.
This gentleman, yeah. And so he and his brother, listen, they've been on it. Okay, they've been on it. So Chris now put himself in a position where he ended up supporting his brother when it, I believe, clearly stated in CNN's rules and regulations that um, family and personal matters take a back seat and everything journalistic takes a front seat because this is your job, this is what you do. Chris went against that, ended up helping his brother write some press releases or whatever that were in favor of his brother and supporting his brother during this crisis. So, in turn, fast forward, he ended up getting fired from that. He ended up getting fired from, sorry, from his highly rated show on CNN. He ended up getting fired from his radio show on
Wow.
Sirius, I think it was. Yeah.
Okay.
So I was sitting down thinking about relationships, um, family relationships or familia, yeah, and and how far you would actually go for a family member. But in this case, I guess like your siblings, because you're really tight with your siblings, and some people aren't again as well. But you have this relationship with your siblings and you want to protect them and you want to see them do well, etc., etc. But if your sibling is quote unquote, being a pedophile, or if your sibling is quote unquote robbing banks and killing people, are you going to protect their name? Are you that, like, I mean, I think there's loyalty to a fault, if you will, and that in this case, you have a he had a huge career. Like I just I don't get it. I love, like, my siblings and I are closer than a chocolate chip cookie and a chocolate chip. Like we are it. That's my squad, and I would do anything for them. However, I can tell you that my parents did not raise no fool, and that if something like that happened, my mother would look at us and be like, "You on your own because I didn't raise you that way." This is and that's my mom, no joke. And I really, like, I thought about it because on one side I was like, "Well, that's really not right. That's your kid." You know what I mean? But at the same time, you're like, I instilled everything in you that I could. I raised you a particular way. If that wasn't, enough, and if that I feel like I did my job. If I did not, and we went down a different path somewhere, then yeah, I mean, I leave it to you because this is not how we roll as a family and how we're raised. So I had so many questions about that, but it really just came down to how far would you go to protect your sibling? And I told all of my siblings, I said, I love y'all, but you kill somebody, you're on your own. I'm not in it for that.
They can't
Like,
call you
just,
with the you not coming with the shovel. You in the garbage bags and the acid. What's I'm
no,
actually getting too
no.
detailed about this. Um,
Like you have
you
experience
right. I
with
know,
it.
right? You're not gonna
Um,
lie in the tub. Like, what's going on? Like, this is a
Maybe when
family
I was like childless, yes, maybe
Okay, so having a baby makes a difference. Yeah, I'm
it
childless,
does
so
make
this makes I definitely could see that.
yeah.
So my understanding of the issue with him being fired from CNN is that he had embarrassed his bosses, that there had been some preliminary conversations about what he
Mhm.
was could and couldn't do, or and that he had not always represented what he was doing accurately or to Jeff Zuckerberg and them. And so, uh, yeah, like, and that part of his getting fired was about having publicly embarrassed his bosses because they had defended and backed him initially. And then I guess more came out about how deeply
Yeah,
involved he was in counseling his brother around
right.
this range of sexual improprieties. Um, I think that you went for a big swing with that range, right? Like you went from pedophile to bank robbery. I might not be
I
I don't know that I care so much about sibling.
I
If my
know, I
sibling robbed
know
a
those
bank,
are
I might be like, do you got your passport in this country that you can go to a country
oh
that don't
man,
have extradition? Like, are you on your way? Because
really,
versus a pedophile
I think
situation, I think that
they're
that's different. I mean, our child was harmed versus a capitalistic
they
system that I
are
don't give a fuck
huge.
about.
There
Yeah,
are huge disparities between both of them for
yeah,
sure. But
yeah.
I know for
Yeah,
me personally, I can't live looking over my shoulder every 2 minutes. I don't care about extra this shit. I don't care about that. I will always feel like somebody is looking for me. I will be stressed out and I won't be able to spend this money with a
because
big
they
smile on my
are,
face. It's
sis.
not
They
that.
are looking for you. No,
Exactly.
I mean,
And that is the thing. That is the
so
thing.
I have two sets of siblings. I have my
Mhm.
mom's, the children my mother birthed, which is I'm the eldest on both sides, so I'm the big brother. So I have a younger brother who's now in his late 20s and a sister who's in her mid 30s on my mom's side, and then I have three sisters that I'm close to who are stair steps in their 30s or 40s. And then I have their missing children because Papa was a Rolling Stone and he don't know where all them children are. So there's like another four who we will find through ancestry.com or something in the future because I said we found one of them. True story.
Oh, wow.
And
That's good.
I have good relationships with all but one sister on my mom's side. But and even that always could be worked on. So I have had, because I'm the big brother, I have had
Mhm.
the hard conversations about morals and ethics and um but I've also tried to give grace as somebody who's fucked up. I feel like your 20s is about fucking
Yeah,
up, all right? Like, and learning from
right.
those mistakes.
And you learn. Mhm.
Right. Like, so I can't be like, oh, be perfect in your 20s and your early 30s while you're still learning. And I know I wasn't. I was definitely
Right.
making ridiculous errors and trying to figure it out. In terms of protecting them, I think it depends on the issue. I could see Chris Cuomo, thinking I'm counseling him about a press response. I'm counseling him about a public relations response. That's probably not that big of a deal. I might, we don't know the relationship between Mario and Chris, and that he might not, we don't know that he didn't him up his brother and like, what the fuck were you thinking? What the fuck was wrong with you? Like, how could you be doing this? Making these kind of errors in judgment around women and their bodies and their bodily autonomy in this day and
Yeah.
age, knowing that they're after you. You're a Democrat in New York. There are always Republicans that's checking for you to make the slightest misstep. I'm sure, depending on
Yeah.
Chris's own attitudes about women, and who knows what the public versus the private persona is around that, right? Like publicly, he might be
Mhm.
like feminist, feminist, feminist. Privately, he might be a douche. We don't know. But
Right.
I'm going to say, give him benefit of the doubt and say he hemmed up his brother. He had that conversation. And then he did the things that siblings do, which is, I'm going to try to protect you after I hem you up. I have hemmed up my siblings on issues and then came up with a fix, came up with the
Hmm.
remedy. So I can't say just no on this one, and I can't even say just know that I'm not gonna get the shovel and help you hide the body. But you tell me you harm the child, it's all bets is off. I can't. That's the one
Yeah.
thing for me that everybody has their line, and that's my line in the sand.
Yeah.
Tell me you hurt
That.
people who are already
That.
vulnerable, who are already oppressed, who are already um, easy prey. I can't with you.
Hmm. Hmm. I hear you. I feel that.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
those were our just know. So tell us, people, what you think about our just know, our it's complicated, and our loving it. We had some very rich, deep conversations with about 15 minutes longer than we wanted to, but we're figuring it out. We're learning. This was our first chance at the rodeo, and
Yeah.
hopefully, talk to us more about the things that you want to see in this podcast. Like, subscribe, share. Please do all three things. At Gibson Gazette, we are on all of the socials, and you can subscribe or like us on all of those. Um, and a website will be launching soon where you will be able to sign up and subscribe to eBlast. We will also be making transcripts of the show available um, soon. So just know that those things are all coming. We are developing this ship and building this ship as we go. And just grateful
Yeah.
that you're a part of it and checking us out, and be on the lookout for us in 2 weeks. You have anything else to add, AMC?
I just want to remind the peoples to please share with us stories you tell. We want to get you engaged. We want to hear from you. Please make sure to share the info with us. And what is our email again? Let's blast out our email because we haven't done
Yes.
that.
The
It,
Gibson Gazette at gmail.com, the Gibson Gazette at gmail.com. There also, if you check our Instagram or our Facebook page, you'll see that there's a whole flyer announcing the storyteller
yeah,
request or the call out for storytellers. It's one page or less, folks. Those stories can be about whatever. Hopefully, they're fun and salacious. They can be what the fuck stories. We only ask that you uh, we'll make it anonymous, even if you won't. We'll come up with an alias for you, even if you don't, to protect the
right.
innocent and the evil.
That's
And
right.
just let us know at the end of the story whether or not it's true or false. That's our little twist on this, is whether or not the story we've just shared and responded to is true or false. So please make sure you give us those stories. Again, it's the Gibson Gazette at gmail.com, and Gibson is GIP as in Paul, SON. We look forward to hearing and reading your stories next time. I'll also be checking for us next week on Twitter. Be looking for announcement for when we go to Twitter Spaces. We'll just be
Yeah.
doing it. We're doing it randomly. We'll be
Talk some
announcing it
shit.
and just doing it. So
That's
and we'll shoot the shit about the different things, the stories that we care about for the week. Um, and if that's nothing else, you want to say goodbye to the people, AMC, and then I'll close us out.
we we are out. Have a fabulous one, and we'll hear y'all in a couple of weeks. Peace.
Yeah, so these are the stories that we tell. What are the stories you're telling yourself about you, and what are the stories you're telling the world? Check us out next time at the Gibson Gazette podcast. Good night.